Hello, lovely YouTube friends. Natalie back with another video. I kind of just did my first unboxing video just because I was so excited about getting my new Tula machine. And who knew that I would get subscribers? So if you are a subscriber, thank you ever so much. And I just wanted to kind of call out something that one of you put on there, which was please do more videos. And I've learned a lot and I really enjoy watching you and you're quite natural. So that's quite nice. Thank you ever so much. So I thought let's do a few more videos, and so today I am going to talk about, I even made notes, I am going to talk about feet, stitch plates, a project that I'm doing and a project error, and by proxy why I bought the feet and the stitch plates to try and fix the error, because I thought rather than just now I've got the machine, rather than just I've bought stuff, I thought, well, let's make it relevant. Why have I bought stuff? What am I trying to do? So for those of you that haven't seen any of my other videos, not that there are many, but I'm quite enjoying them, so there could be in the future. I am a Tula Pink enthusiast, I am a Bernina enthusiast, and I'm a research enthusiast. So I just kind of like learning about stuff. So what I've got for you today is information that I gleaned when I tried to fix a problem with my current project. So that's probably a good place to start. So let me tell you about my current project. Now, I and my bestie, who also has a Bernina, and let's be fair, she was the one that convinced me that I needed to upgrade my Bernina from the 475 I think I was going to get to the current B570. So she was the one that said, no, you must have embroidery and you must have a Tula Pink one. Thank you ever so much for that. It cost me a fortune, but I love her. So me and my bestie during lockdown, or just before lockdown, wanted to spend more time together. And instead of going to coffee shops and going shopping and so on and so forth, we decided that we were going to do a quilting project. So it would give us time to basically stitch and bitch, but we were going to do it monthly. We've got a couple of months set up. We ordered our fabric, and a call out here to the lovely Jubbly Fabrics and Jade Newham, I think it is, where we bought this project. So this is the electric slide quilt. It's a free spirit. I think it's a free one, but Jade put all of the fabrics together so we could create this beautiful, very kind of Art Deco-esque linear, because I was freaking out by some of the complex quilts that were out there, because let's face it, Jane is amazing. I am a dressmaker, hence why I was going after the 4 edition, that has embraced craft sewing, because sometimes you just don't want to make clothes for yourself, you don't want to make clothes for somebody else, but you still feel the need to sew. So I'm a bit of a multitasker. So when that doesn't look nice. When I bought my sewing machine, I did need to make sure that I had kind of all the functionality to be able to make stuff for the bed, but make stuff as well for myself, my children, my girls. So I do refer to my kids all the time. I have 2 young daughters, both under the age of 5. So homeschooling is kind of fun for reception class. But let's see how we kind of get on. Enough about me, more about my issue. So Jane and I, we've been cutting out via Zoom calls. Jane is way ahead of me. And so we have been cutting and then sewing at home. Now, as I mentioned, Jane is an expert and she is whizzing through this, and me trying to whiz through this is coming up across some particular issues. And these were the issues as to why I thought, right, I need to go and figure out how to use my sewing machine better, hair in my mouth, to be able to not waste the value of the sewing fabric that I've just bought, because I don't want to do it a disservice. I'm not going to spend this amount of time on something and not love it at the end. So while I've got a bit of time, I'm going to take you through it. So here are our first blocks. Green and pink. I absolutely love the colour. This kind of the kind of pink and salmon, that whole coral, that's me. I love it. I love it. I love wearing it. I love looking at it. And so these are my favourite blocks. I know there are issues, but the issue that I'm trying to deal with is, so this sounds so stupid, sewing in a straight line. Now I can sew in a straight line, that's not the problem. The problem I'm having is that when I get to the end of the line, when you're running out of fabric, and excuse the nails because I've ended up chewing them off in in lockdown. We'll call it stress. In fact, where is my stiletto? Because that makes really good, there you go. I will use my Tula stiletto, which is a vicious looking implement, but is very good at pointing at things. When I get to the end of a line, what I'm finding is I end up with this tiny little kind of fishtail squiff. Now, if I was making a Bargello quilt, it wouldn't be a problem because you just kind of snip that off because it's about having lengths and lengths and lengths. So I could just snip it off. But because I'm not, because I'm sewing specific lines, I can't really do that. And what I'm finding is that the tops are starting okay. As I get to the bottom, I'm ending up with a little squiff. And here is a brilliant example of said squiff. See? Straight, 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 and then it goes off onto a little squiff. It's not every single line that I'm finding this, but it's enough that when you compound that issue by 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 seams, and it's a millimetre each time. Oh, there's a loose thread there. And it's a millimetre each time. I'm ending up with 1/2 centimetre or potentially, you know, a couple of centimetres at the end, which means that when I put my ruler, why do I get the feeling that this is going to be a straight line one? Oh, no, it's not. So when I put my ruler, so if I line up this end here, and I know you're supposed to, you know, trim and all of that good stuff, but I don't want to trim if I don't need to trim. What I'm finding is that, so it starts off well. And then because of the squiff, I'm losing that nice straight edge. Let's see if it's the same on this side. Yeah, see, on this side, I'm not getting that. And I suspect, looking at it, yeah, on the longer side, I'm not getting it. I don't know why. I think it's just peculiar. It's my sewing, but I need to be doing better. So so I sat down and I thought, right, how am I going to fix this? So let's think about what's happening. You've got 2 pieces of fabric together. You've got feed dogs underneath, and that's pulling the fabric through. Because we don't want to put our fingers underneath the foot. God, what is wrong with my brain today? Because you don't want to put your fingers underneath the foot. When you get to the end, you can only hold it with this one side of your hand. So as it's coming in, what I think I'm doing is I'm putting too much pressure on this side, and what's happening is it's pulling the fabric to this side. And so what's happening is I'm now getting that squiff, because if I look at it, the stitching is coming closer to the edge of my fabric because I'm pulling the edge of my fabric in this direction. So noodled it out and thought, right, what do I need to do? I thought, okay, I need to look at getting a new foot. Now, I've always had a 1/4 inch seam foot, but what I wanted to do was try and get more precision and more control. I love the dual feed on my Bernina, and I did want to do a video on the difference between a dual feed and a walking foot, because I know a lot of people have talked about it, and again, did my research, read up, and I do understand the difference between it. So if you'd like to see that video, put it in the comments, but I probably will go ahead and make it. So what I've done is I've bought myself a new foot. Now, while researching said foot, I've also bought myself a foot that comes with a seam guide. Let's explain why I bought that foot and why I bought the seam guide. So here is the seam guide, and it's separate to the foot, and I kind of wanted it to be separate for a foot for a specific reason. And the way that the seam guide works is you've got 2 little holes, or 1 little hole. Everybody will have it on the plate of their sewing machine. Really not rocket science. You put it on there, you put it to the desired design, your foot would sit here, your fabric goes through, and you just bump your fabric up against the seam guide. Now, brilliant, because as I'm pulling the fabric this way, what I thought I can do is apply the same pressure to push the fabric against the seam guide, so that when I get to the end, I can just kind of push it through. So I can use the seam guide so that I don't get a fishtail the other way. Result. So seam guide purchase, cha-ching. Now what I also wanted to do, I mentioned that I did have a 1/4 inch seam, but I didn't have a dual feed. And I've made the decision that when I buy a foot now, I need it to have a dual feed. And the dual feed is because I wanted to get greater precision. So I wanted to make sure, because the other thing that tends to happen is that when you get to the end, because your hand is on the top and the feed dogs are on the bottom, the feed dogs are holding. But if I put the pressure, every now and again, I was finding that the top piece of fabric might also slip. Now the feed dogs are holding the bottom fabric, and the dual feed is holding the top fabric. So between the 2 of them, top and bottom, little teeth holding that in place. So I've gone and bought myself a dual feed. It's a 97D. Now, doing the research, I thought, you know, I'm going to take 2 minutes and I'm going to talk to you about the different types of feet that come with your Bernina or are available to your Bernina. So the first thing I'm going to say is there's 2 types of shanks for the current Berninas that are out there, because every now and again I go and have a look and I want to go and see, you know, I might buy feet, but I might not want to buy a brand new foot. Now, I bought my sewing machine from Frank Nut. I also bought my stitch plates and my new feet from Frank Nut, and I will put them in the description link below so that we can share the goodness, because they're a fantastic company, always open to discussions about why and what and so on and so forth. And to be fair, I did ring them and I was going to buy a different foot before I arrived at the 97. So I'll talk through my reasonings for that. But first thing I was going to say is, if you look at the shank on the new Berninas, they are solid. They've got a solid shank across, pointy thing. They have a solid shank here. So if I put that there, they have, let's see if it's going to focus. It's a solid shank here. The old Berninas don't have a solid shank. They have 2 prongs. So if you look at this side, you'll see prong, prong, and that piece here doesn't exist. So if you're ever unsure, if you're buying a second-hand foot, take the foot out of your current Bernina, see if it's got a 2 prong or a solid prong. If you can't see the prong on the photographs when you're purchasing, ask them to take a photograph and then you will know if it will fit your machine or not. So first thing, if you just have a number on your foot, so this is a 2A, which is an overlock foot, which I use all the time when sewing, when dressmaking. I do have an overlocker and I love my overlocker, but sometimes you really can't be bothered to overlock something. So I will pull out my overlock foot, and to be fair, when I first found this, it was a godsend, and I use it all the time. It doesn't trim, so which doesn't really always matter, but it's a wonderful foot. Anyway, this is not why I am talking to you about this foot. What I wanted to show you is that standard feet like this are just the simple, straightforward feet that you would find on any sewing machine. So there is a straightforward 97, there is a 97D, and there's the difference between the 2. Now, the second foot that I was going to share with you is called a C foot. You see it? So it's a number and a C, and it has this kind of gubbinsy piece on the side. Now, I have a Bernina 570, which means I have a 9mm stitch capacity, we'll call it. So when you're doing your decorative stitches, rabbits, birds, all the kind of craziness that came on my machine, I can stitch the image to be 9mm from one side to the other, which is great when you're decorating things like girls' clothes and bags and so on and so forth. It does have its downsides, and that is why I bought a new stitch plate, so we'll talk about that later. But if you are looking for feet, if it says C on it, what it typically means is that they are designed to have a hole in the bottom. Again, let's get the pointy thing out, that is 9mm. So you would always be assured that you could do a 9mm zigzag or a rabbit or whatever it is that you then wanted to do using these feet. So that's why they have C on them, as opposed to these ones, which clearly do not allow you to do 9mm. Now, the last stitch or foot that I'm going to talk about are the D feet, and they look like this. These are designed to work with your jewel feed. So your jewel feed comes down at the back and it clicks, and you'll see at the back of the foot there's a hole here, because this is where your jewel feed comes through and grabs your top layer of fabric to pull it through. And as I say, I will talk more about that with the walking foot. Now, I originally wanted to get a foot called a 57D. Now, the 57D had the guide associated, so it was actually stuck to the foot. So if I ever wanted to remove the guide, I wasn't able to. And if I ever wanted it to be more than a 1/4 inch, I was never going to be able to do that either. So if I decide, you know what, I want to do a seam, but I want it to be an inch or however long, I didn't have the flexibility as I would do here to be able to move it. So, you know, great, but not great. It's not going to kind of adapt. And I want to get maximum use out of the feet that I have. Now, the other thing, and I will credit Frank Nut for telling me this, is that when you look at the bottom of your feet, this is a great example. Look at how much foot you have here, and also think about how wide your feed dogs are. So I have a 9mm machine. So I'm going to show you the stitch plate that it comes with. Here is now my 9mm hole, and here are where the feed dogs sit. So my feed dogs are quite wide apart to accommodate for having this kind of 9mm piece in the bottom. The problem with that is if you take a standard foot, and let's align that like this, it only just covers the feed dog. So if you've moved it for any reason over to this side, you're losing the contact of the foot to your feed dog, and by proxy the fabric coming underneath the foot. Now when you look at this foot here, if I'd have bought the smaller 57 foot, this side remains the same, and this is where the guide goes, because it has to have a 1/4 inch from here to here. That goes without saying. What it also has is a 1/4 inch on the other side, which means that you lose half of your foot and the contact between that foot and your feed dog. So if I again show you this on the stitch plate, you will see exactly what I mean. So there you go. So you would look at it like that, and as you turn it over, which would probably be a better way for you to look at it, like this, you can see you get a ton more contact. And for me, making sure that the fabric is going through underneath as I get to the end when I'm losing the ability to manipulate it with my fingers was really quite key. So I decided I was going to go with the 97D, not the 57. Even though I've started on the 57, I made the decision that contact with the fabric, manipulation of the fabric equals precision with the fabric. And so that's what I went for. Whew, enough about feet. Okay, so I'm going to move from here onto my stitch plate, because I also made the decision that I wanted to buy a straight, what's it called? A straight stitch plate. Got too many stitches in there, but the reason for that is this, as I said, was what came with me. I then have this 9-inch hole. Now the reason why I've bought the straight inch is because I also do dressmaking, and if you're starting a seam and you want a really scant kind of seam allowance at the edge, or perhaps you're doing edge stitching and you're edge stitching or top stitching a point on a collar, you need to be really close to the edge of that fabric. The problem with this plate is when your fabric sits in the middle and you put a needle through it like this, you don't have enough underneath for the needle not to take the fabric into the bottom of the gubbins of the machine for it to get caught up in the hook and to like make it and chew it up a little bit. And so when I'm starting my starting my seam, what I don't want to do is have like a crinkly little kind of front end piece where it's pulled it down. It's also the same, like you can use this stitch plate even though you're not supposed to. It works, it does its job, but you can use this with your embroidery machine. The machine's going to keep telling you swap to a straight stitch, swap to a straight stitch. But the reason why it's telling you to do that is because when the needle goes through the fabric in so many kind of perforations, again, it's looking for the support underneath it so that it doesn't have potentially kind of 4.5mm on one side and 4.5mm for it to be able to pull through. So I bought a straight stitch plate, which is this straight stitch plate. So again, all of the feed dogs, but just one tiny. What that means is that I can only do a straight run. It also means that I can't change the position of the needle when I'm doing a straight run. So again, the concept of having a guide helps me because I can move the fabric rather than what I would typically do, which was move the needle so that I would then be running against the edge of the foot. So it kind of, again, gives you more kind of flexibility. And I've also bought this because Jane was right. I do love embroidery. I am a geek and I love embroidering everything. Christmas this year, friends got towels and washcloths and all sorts of things. And it's like, if you leave it, I will embroider it. The girls' clothes, pimp my children's clothes. Absolutely. So now I go down to next and there's like, oh, it's really plain and boring. Not anymore, because mummy sat and pimped it. So yeah, having great fun with the embroidery, and this is going to hopefully help my embroidery, because what I'm finding is regardless of how much stabilizer I put in there, and I'm faffing about with the hoop, because you don't want to over tighten the hoop, because when you take it off it's going to curl because it was too tight and you don't want it too loose, and so on and so forth. So what I'm now thinking is, if I explore everything and you get everything, the right fabric, the right tension, the right bottom thread, the right top thread, I mean, there's so much to think about. I mean, it really does it could potentially put you off. But then you could have someone like me that does all of this research for you, or gets you started on the research, and a proper stitch plate to stop it going kind of through, or creating that kind of bag, if you like, or sagging of the fabric into that tiny little space. When you finish and you take it out, occasionally we would get tiny little puckers that, you know, no amount of ironing is going to get out. So again, straight stitch. So that's how I'm kind of getting on, and we will see if this makes a difference. So what I might do, I know it's going to make a difference. It wasn't the biggest and most expensive kind of purchase I've ever done, and I'm sure this will make a difference, because there is no way that that fabric can get pulled into the gubbins underneath. So straight stitch plates, check. Talked about that. Talked about my seam guide, talked about the feet, talked about the project, talked about, tips and tricks on the projects. So as mentioned, my friend Jane, and I might just have to have a sip of coffee. I should say another passion of mine is Emma Bridgewater. So my other half bought me this, I think for Mother's Day, just because he loved me. So it was a little red ladybird. He also bought me the sewing one as well from the girls, which was sweet. Tips and tricks. So Jane is an avid sewer, and I think I'm more of an avid collector at times, because I mean, look at my wall behind me. I like things to look kind of pretty, and it all kind of gets set up and kind of stuck on there. And I'll point out those lovely little wings. Jane made those for my daughter, who was a bridesmaid at her wedding, and all of them had these like little quilted wings. They were so cute. So Jane's idea, and we'll just steal it. She bought all of these see-through bags. What's this called? Not gauze, organza bags, and I have a ton of them. So every time we when we got our kit, we broke them down into all the different colour blocks, because there's 4 colour blocks and so on and so forth. We sorted it all out, because there's a ton of fabric in these, and then every time that we cut it up, put it back into the bag, so that nothing ever gets kind of lost or mixed up together, and it's very obvious what goes with what. And then we also have a massive bag of leftover fabrics, so that at the end, what I want to do is make a sewing machine cover for my sewing machine, but I'm going to use all the leftover fabrics from this this quilt. So typically it is going to be striping, because I have lots of striping, but it's going to be very, very precision, because I have expertly changed my way of sewing in order to ensure that my quilt comes out straight. So I'm hoping that my kind of sewing machine cover will also come out straight. Okay, waffle. Oh, one last thing that I did want to share before I log off. I did not make this, but oh my God, ba-bum. So this was my present to me for Christmas. Not that I needed one, but who could not resist this? Now, this is made by a lady called Christy Chang. She's on Facebook, but I bought it from her via Etsy. It did take a while to come, because she is based in the US. I am a fox fiend. Love it. So I requested what it was. I've also started saving all my selvages, because I'm determined to do something with it. I'm thinking about making the bionic gear bag on the outside with all of my Tula selvages, because they are works of art. But oh my God, I love this. Now, I didn't think that when it was going to come, it was going to be like this big, but you know, who doesn't love a pincushion? So I made my own pincushion. Ta-da! It's actually kind of coming out, because I like to upcycle still Tula fabric, and I actually wanted something that was really hard, because I don't like it when your pincushion kind of moves around. So I bought this, and when I saw this in the shop, in the antique shop, I was like, that is screaming out to be a pincushion. And it seems to be a bit of a hobby at the moment, because I've started making kind of coffee canisters into pincushions, and yeah, there's all sorts of kind of good and wonderful things that become pincushions. In fact, my bestie even made me a pincushion. I'll show it to you. Ta-ta! So this came from my birthday, using up her scraps from it, and she embroidered a lovely "N" on there for me. So yeah, I'm seem to be kind of collecting, but I think by the state of the room in which you see me, you realise that I collect quite a lot. Now, I am going to attempt to do some editing. I do want to kind of show you the setup of the machine, so I can show you the foot, and I can show you what I mean when I'm kind of pushing the fabric underneath. I have done a few more blocks, so I sat down and did these yesterday. And already I'm thinking that they look a bit straighter, but let's have a quick test, because it's always good to see how, you know, if what I'm actually saying is the truth. So let's see. Oh God, let's hope this works. I'm not sure if that's just because my cutting's out, to be fair. I think it's my cutting. Yeah, because if I look at that, that's my cutting out, not the fabric going on the squiff. I can see that because I can see the edge. So phew, although now I'm going to have to learn, because if I look at that side as well, that's pretty straight, but it's my fabric cutting. I'm glad I did that, because now I'm going to have to make sure that my fabric cutting is better, because we're just kind of cutting full strips and cutting the end rather than cutting up all the individual strips, because that was too much cutting to start with. Anyway, I think I am going to wrap the video here because I am starting to waffle. You know, thank you ever so much to the handful of subscribers, I think 16 of you, which was like fabulous. And thank you ever so much to the people that have made comments. As mentioned, I think I might update on the, somebody asked for an update on the La Pasque, I can't even pronounce that, quilt that I talked about in another edition. So I'll pull that out because I have been moving kind of forward with it. It is massive, but I will pull that out and do you an update. I also want to talk about the dual feed and walking foot, but I am open to ideas because I'm really enjoying doing this. I do kind of podcasts and stuff for work, and let's just face it, for what I do for work, that's a bit snoozerama, whereas this is my hobby and I love chatting, as you probably guess. So if there is something, or if anybody's got any suggestions on how I make this better, then, you know, please again drop it into the comments, and I will do my best to take them on board. Apart from that, thank you very much, YouTube friends, and hopefully I'll see you on the next one. Thanks, bye.